We represent Barnegat with a program known as Keys, unlocking their past, discovering our future.
The aim of this project is to offer the students an opportunity of community outreach that will connect lessons learned in American history to the faces we see today.
The American 20th century formed many customs practiced now, such as the typical 9-to-5 workdays. Some may question when one would find the time to interact with members of the family.
In the 1930s, a decade dominated by a depressive economy, many could not find employment in specialized sectors, so people would spend months out of work with their family.
Parents who needed to find ways to pay for food and clothing struggled immensely.
The following men were alive during this time and experienced these hardships. Here are their stories. Thomas Jacob Taylor grew up in rural Essington, Pennsylvania in the 1930s.
His family lived on a cucumber farm, where he spent much of his childhood working the fields and picking cucumbers.
When the Great Depression hit, there was not much money, but his family was able to pull through.
In his rural town, there was no electricity until the TVA began to install electricity in towns such as Essington.
Taylor, trained as an electrician, was able to install electricity into his own home.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in what they call Essington, Pennsylvania. It's a rural town outside of Philadelphia, southwest Philadelphia, down where the Philadelphia airport is. My mother and father, my mother was born on a farm in Delaware. That's where I used to work during the summers, picking cucumbers, killing pigs. In Essington, I went to Essington Public School up till I think 1939 or something. It was similar. Our subject was mainly reading, writing, arithmetic. We didn't have there was no computers, no TV, no buses, none of you walk to school whether it was a mile. In fact, my mother went to school 8 miles.
Wow.
She only went to 3rd grade. We, as kids, there was nothing around there. You played outside at night. I know when I went, a lot of my clothes, some of my shirts and all were made by my mother. They made their own clothes. Nobody had any money in the 30s. Nobody. I used to get maybe sometime a penny or 2 cents to buy candy on your way to school. It was a little candy store. But with a penny, you could get something.
Born into a small Staten Island family that had already been affected by the Great Depression, John Rivers was seeded to a Catholic orphanage as a result of the death of his mother and the inability for his father to find a job.
For most of his early life, he spent much time traveling back and forth between farms and the orphanage, due to being adopted and brought back on several occasions.
The following will touch upon his time working at one of the farms in the heat of the summer.
You get up in the morning, you work. Get off from school, and you work.
What was the worst job you've had during your childhood to adolescence?
Pretty much the farming, I wasn't crazy about chicken farming because, you step in a chicken pen all the time, And hell, all summer long, you never wore shoes, so you're walking through the chicken pen all the time. And, there's always a lot of lice with chickens, lice and rats, because the rats live on the chicken feed. And that was probably one of the, even when I lived on the first farm, that was tough because when you wanted to take a bath, you couldn't do it because there was no place to take a bath. So in the summertime, they put out one of these galvanized tubs. You ever see these? Yeah. Galvanized tubs. Put that out in the sun with the water, with the sun, warm it up to take a bath.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, that was the bath. Yeah.
Michael Turturro grew up in a large family with many older siblings during the Great Depression in a rural community outside of the Bronx.
With high unemployment, his father was obligated to look elsewhere for income. As a construction worker who had nothing to build, he was forced to work night shifts in factories.
How did your family become more resourceful with the things that you had?
Well, I always say the youngest of the group. My older brother then became old enough where he went out and was working a job. Then my other brother, he was old enough that he got into the job force also, so they helped the family.
Born in Brooklyn in 1927, Dominic Preziotti is the son of an Italian immigrant iron worker.
Despite his father losing his job when the Depression hit in 1929, Preziotti was still optimistic about life.
Preziotti had what he called a good support system, where everyone in his community helped each other make it through the Depression.
Describing it as weathering the storm, he was able to get through the 1930s, not feeling the brunt of the Depression while simultaneously growing closer to his family and community.
I keep talking about a strong support system. We had relatives that helped each one of us out. We didn't have to go somewhere else and to seek some help. Especially since I was 2 years old when the crash occurred, so I really didn't know too much before that. But what it did is it slowed down the possibility that we would achieve a better life with our own home, because they didn't have work. Without the work, the money wasn't coming in. They just couldn't spend it or imagine how they could get to that point.
The 20th century of America was a time for change in politics, scientific knowledge, culture, and foreign affairs.
During the Great Depression in the 1930s, many people could not find employment to support themselves in the depressive economy and struggled to maintain their households and education.
These brave men have described some of the hardships they lived through.
The Barnegat High School program, known as Keys, aims to offer the students an opportunity to connect lessons learned in American history to the faces we see today.
Thank you for listening.